Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm making a trestle table. And this may be one video, maybe a couple videos. I'm not exactly sure how I'm gonna break it down. But I've already worked a lot of my lumber. We're making this out of 8/4 ash. And trestle tables, like the legs, your ankle braces, the bottom leg, and the stretcher are always known to be, or at least sometimes you can do the stretcher with 8/4. It depends on the look you're going for, but they're always meant to be big, bulky, beefy looking legs, and that's what we're trying to do. So what I've done, I got two smaller glue ups here. They are going to be for the bottom of the legs, and then this big long glue up in the back, it's going to be the stretcher. So I've already done your leg itself, got it glued up. Now we're going to start this video by running it through and squaring it up. I used 8/4 and I was trying to get a 4x4 square out of it. Sometimes you can. It's actually pretty rare to be able to do that, but I'm gonna try 3.5 by 3.5, maybe do 3/4 by 3/4, depending on how it looks once we get to that point. So what we're gonna do, we've already got these, they've been glued up. This is one leg. They've been glued up. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to just take a scraper I've got and knock some of this glue off, and we're gonna run through and join it on two sides, and then run through the planer and get it down to that 3.5 by 3.5 or 3/4. Sorry, 3 3/4 by 3 3/4. Just see what it looks. And we're probably just gonna take it to 3.5, just because that's just a good number, like your 1/2 inch numbers, 3.5, 4, 4.5, stuff like that. It's just easier to keep that flow, and as far as some of this wood goes, because it's rough cut lumber, so it's going to have some I don't know what you call it, but some defects. There's one right there. Some defects in it that it's just easier once you break it down, because that's actually what's milled for. 8/4 is milled to be cut, smooth, planed, all that good stuff, down to 3.5. So I mean, that's what we're gonna go with. So y'all stick around. It's gonna get fun. I took these legs through the joiner to get a nice square edge, and then I found that it was best to take it through the planer to get everything good and square and straight, and I found it better than actually using the table saw. While the rest of the legs were still in clamps, I decided to start cutting for the tabletop itself. And knowing that my joiner is really undersized for this type of project, I had a fairly rough time getting these 8-foot boards, actually they're 8.5-foot boards, through my little joiner. But after I finally got them squared up, I took them through the planer and it worked just fine to get them good and even on both sides. And after getting these boards good and flat and squared up, I decided to go through and go ahead and glue them up versus trying to take them through the planer just by themselves. This makes a lot more sense, as I have a 12-inch planer. I could take two boards at a time and have a wider flat space versus taking a risk of them being uneven. I let them set overnight, and then I took them through the planer to get them planed down to the 1.5-inch thickness. Once I had them planed, I went through and glued some more up. Then I started working on the vertical part of the leg itself, getting all of my mortises and my tenons marked and then cut for the stretcher and the bottom of the leg and the top of the leg. Using the Forstner bit and my drill press, I went through and drilled out the mortise for the stretcher. Then after the mortise was drilled out, I took a chisel and a mallet and squared up and straightened up all the sides for the mortise. Once the mortise was finished, I took the legs over the table saw and using my dado stack, I cut the tenons. Once the tenons were cut, I decided to go through and drill the mortise for the top of the leg next. And just like with the leg, I took a chisel and a mallet to go through and square up and straighten up all the holes, all the sides for the mortise. Once that was finished, I decided to go ahead and glue up more boards for the top. These are already been planed, so I can get them started drying and get them clamped up. I use these boards that was basically leftovers for the top and the bottom to help keep it straight. That has a name to it, but it's not coming to me. But it really did help keeping the board flat, so the tabletop would actually be flat. Next, I took the top of the legs through the table saw to cut the tendons for the top stretchers. To cut the tendons on the main beam stretcher, due to the thickness, I decided to use my router, and it worked very well. Once the tendons were cut and all the parts were sanded, I decided to start assembling the legs. I started with the bottom of the leg and a 6-inch piece of, well, milled down is 1.5 inches long or 1.5 inches thick board. I made it as feet, so there's 4 of them. That's 2 to each leg. As always, it's better to drill the hole first before you put a screw in to keep the wood from splitting. I had a little trouble with the foot wanting to move around a little bit while I was putting the screw in, so I'd loosen it back up just a hair to line it back up to get the second hole drilled. These ankle braces are basically a staple for these trestle tables. So I went through, and instead of cutting Morrison's antennas on them, I decided to go with the dowel technique, which I glued and screwed the angle pieces on there. But once the glue was dry, I went through and put dowels in a little later on. I kept using my square to make sure that I wasn't moving the vertical piece of the leg, and luckily I did not, so that helped a lot.
At this point, I actually broke my drill bit off. It was getting real dull to start with, but I tried to take it for as long as I could, and then I actually broke it off. I had to get a new drill bit. So I was trying to get the old one out at this point. And this last angle piece, I decided it was just easier to set the leg over on its side to screw it in, and I wish I'd done that to begin with, because it was a whole lot easier than trying to deal with it standing upright. And once both legs were complete and the glue dried, I went through with an 1/8 inch round over bit in my trim router and just rounded over all them sharp edges. The people that this table's going to has a small child, and I'd hate to see the child bust their head or anything on the table. So went through and just took a round over on all them pieces, and I actually done the stretcher as well. And after the roundovers were done, it was time to assemble the frame for the table. So I lined up both sides of the legs and set the stretcher on the ends, trying to make sure that they were spaced out just the easiest way that I knew how. And once the tenons on the stretcher was in the mortises on the legs, I got my ratchet strap out. This is a clamp I got from Harbor Freight a few years ago, and it was worth every penny. It comes with these little angle pieces, or these little brace pieces, so it doesn't harm your material, and it really does help out. You can really get a good tight fit on it. So I would tighten that strap up, make sure it was as level as center as possible, and it really brought them in good and straight. With these stretchers on top, I just went through and with a clamp, just a ratcheting clamp, and put them in. Now here's the point where I was talking about. I went through and took the screws out once the glue was dry. I drilled down with a 1/2 inch spade bit, and I put dowel in. I put dowels in to, that way I like not having any kind of actual hardware in my table. So dowels give that effect of there is a fastener but not a fastener. And by that time, the tabletop was glued and dried. So I went through and cut up the ends to get it straight and get it down to the correct size. And once the top was cut, I went through with a 3/8 round over in my trim router and just went all the way around the sides just to give it that good round over look. And after that, I went in and sanded the top. Then I went through with my biscuit router for the grooves for the Z-clips, and I put several, I think there's 16 total, in the top, so I could attach the top to the frame. Then I went back to the tabletop, and I put in these little apron pieces. The customers, they wanted a very thick looking tabletop, but they didn't want all that weight. So I went through and I done this apron deal, and it looks like it has a 3-inch tabletop, but really it's just 1.5 inches with this apron on it. Once this top was done and all dried up, I went through with that 1/8 inch on my trim router again, that round over bit, and I went through all around the sides just to give it a nice round over.